Absolutely. Here's a 500-word story centered on the topic. What Untreated OCD Does to Your Mental Health, written as a personal, emotional narrative. What Untreated OCD Does to Your Mental Health, a story of silent struggle. For years, Julian didn't know he had OCD. He thought he was just overly cautious, maybe even a little weird. He double-checked the locks, then checked again and again. He rewound conversations in his head for hours, analyzing every word, convinced he might have offended someone. He washed his hands until they were raw and red. People joked about being so OCD, but what Julian lived with wasn't quirky. It was exhausting. At first, it was manageable, or so he told himself. He'd leave the house a few minutes late to redo his rituals. He'd tell friends he had a thing about germs, or that he was just really detail-oriented. But over time, the rituals multiplied. The intrusive thoughts grew louder, more frequent, more disturbing. Thoughts he didn't want, images, impulses, looped through his mind like a broken record. He felt trapped in his own head, ashamed and terrified of what his brain kept throwing at him. He didn't talk about it. Not because he didn't want help, but because he didn't understand it. All he knew was that something was wrong. Really wrong. Sleep became harder. Relationships strained. He avoided certain places, people, and situations that triggered the thoughts. At work, he started slipping, missing deadlines, zoning out in meetings, taking forever to complete simple tasks. Every decision became a battleground. What if I mess this up? What if something terrible happens and it's my fault? Even choosing what shirt to wear became a ritual, repeated over and over until it felt right. The worst part wasn't the rituals. It was the shame. The secret belief that he was broken. That no one would understand. That if he told someone the thoughts he was having, they'd think he was dangerous or crazy. So he stayed quiet. That silence came at a cost. Untreated, the OCD morphed from a series of rituals into a constant state of anxiety and mental fatigue. His world became smaller and smaller. He started isolating himself, skipping out on friends and family, missing events he used to love. His mind never rested. And when the intrusive thoughts got too loud, they pulled him into panic attacks, intense, overwhelming waves of fear that left him curled up on the bathroom floor, gasping for air. Eventually, it was his sister who intervened. She noticed the changes, the withdrawn behavior, the late-night texts that didn't make sense, the hollow look in his eyes. She gently asked him if he was okay, and for the first time, he said no. That one word opened the door to help. Years later, with therapy and support, Julian would look back and realize that untreated OCD had nearly stolen his life. Not in one dramatic moment, but slowly, quietly, thought by thought, ritual by ritual. And he knew now that it didn't have to be that way. Because the truth is, OCD is treatable, and no one deserves to fight that battle alone in the dark. Would you like to select 2 sentences from this story to turn into an AI voiceover? Let me know the lines and which voice you'd like. Alloy, Echo, Onyx, Nova, or Shimmer? Of course! Here's a 500-word continuation of Julian's story, exploring what happens after he begins seeking help and how his mental health starts to shift. Getting help didn't magically fix everything. Julian learned that early in therapy. The first few sessions were uncomfortable, foreign even. He wasn't used to talking about himself without filtering every sentence. At first, he downplayed things, still afraid that saying his intrusive thoughts out loud would make them real. But his therapist didn't flinch. She explained that OCD was a disorder, not a reflection of who he was. She talked about intrusive thoughts being just that, thoughts, not desires, not truths. That moment was like air rushing into a room he hadn't realized was suffocating him. For the first time, Julian began to understand what was happening inside his mind. He wasn't dangerous. He wasn't broken. He was dealing with a treatable mental illness. Exposure and response prevention, ERP therapy, was the next step. It sounded terrifying, confronting the very thoughts and fears he'd spent years running from. But with guidance, Julian took it slow. Instead of washing his hands after every imagined contamination, he would wait, sit in the discomfort, let the anxiety come and go without performing the ritual. It was agony at first, but gradually the fear loosened its grip. The more he resisted the compulsions, the weaker they became. It wasn't a straight line. There were setbacks, panic attacks, and days where he felt like quitting. But there were also moments of victory, small ones, like touching a doorknob without washing his hands. Bigger ones, like going to dinner with friends without rehearsing every word in his head. Over time, he started to feel like he could live again. Not survive, but live. He got back into photography, something he had abandoned when his OCD was at its worst. It was grounding. Focusing the lens on something outside himself brought relief. It reminded him that beauty still existed, even when his mind tried to convince him otherwise. He also began reconnecting with people, not all at once, and not with everyone, but with those who had stuck by him. He talked to his sister more, telling her bits and pieces about what he was going through. She listened, never judging, always reminding him of his progress. It meant more to him than he could say. Perhaps the biggest shift was internal. Julian stopped identifying with his OCD. It was something he had, not something he was. That distinction gave him space to be a person again, a flawed, growing, hopeful person. He still had to work at it. The rituals didn't vanish overnight. The thoughts still visited, especially in times of stress. But now he had tools, he had awareness, and most importantly, he had support. Julian often thought about how close he had come to losing himself entirely. Untreated OCD had taken so much from him, his time, his relationships, his peace. But with treatment, he had begun the slow, steady process of reclaiming it all. And he knew now that healing wasn't about being perfect. It was about fighting for himself. Every single day. Let me know if you'd like to turn part of this into an AI-generated voiceover. Just pick any 2 sentences and your favorite voice from Alloy, Echo, Fable, Onyx, Nova, or Shimmer. Absolutely. Here's an additional 200-word paragraph to continue and deepen Julian's journey. Julian now sees his experience as something that shaped him, not something that defines him. He no longer hides the fact that he lives with OCD. When it comes up in conversation, he speaks about it openly, not for attention, but to normalize it. He's found that when he shares, others do too. Friends who once stayed silent about their anxiety or depression now feel safe enough to speak. It's a ripple effect. Honesty leading to more honesty. Connection built through shared vulnerability. Julian doesn't glamorize his struggle, but he's proud of how far he's come. What untreated OCD did to his mental health was profound. It isolated him, drained him, convinced him he was alone in his suffering. But getting help taught him the opposite, that support is out there, that healing is possible, and that no one should have to carry the weight of mental illness in silence. He's not cured, but he's living, truly living, and that means everything. These days, when he looks in the mirror, he no longer sees someone fragile or flawed. He sees someone brave, someone healing, someone who chose to stay. Let me know if you'd like to turn any part of this story into a voice clip. Just pick your favorite 2 sentences and the voice you'd like from the list.